Your story begins in the deep, dark waters of the open ocean. Your mother, a massive female sunfish weighing over 2,000 pounds, has just released millions upon millions of eggs into the water. She doesn't stick around to see what happens next because that's not how this works. She's done her job, and now it's up to chance, ocean currents, and sheer dumb luck to determine whether you'll even survive the next few hours. You start as a tiny transparent egg drifting in the endless blue. You're completely at the mercy of the currents, spinning slowly through the water column with no control over where you're going. Around you, millions of your siblings are doing the same thing. Most of them won't make it past this stage. Some will be eaten by plankton, others will drift into waters too cold or too warm, and many will simply dissolve back into the ocean before they ever get a chance to hatch. But not you. After a few days, something shifts inside your egg. Your tiny body has been developing, growing from a cluster of cells into something that vaguely resembles a fish. The egg casing starts to weaken, and you push against it with movements that are more reflex than intention. Then it splits open, and you're free. Congratulations, you're now a larval sunfish, and you look absolutely nothing like what you'll become. You're smaller than a pinhead, translucent, and covered in spines that make you look like a tiny sea urchin with fins. Those spines aren't for show. They're your first line of defense against the countless creatures that see you as nothing more than a floating snack. The ocean around you is a nightmare of mouths and teeth. Jellyfish drift by like transparent death traps, their tentacles trailing poison. Small fish dart through the water, snapping up anything that moves. Even other plankton, creatures barely bigger than you, will try to eat you if they get the chance. Your spines help, but they're not foolproof. You're still just a tiny morsel floating in an ocean full of hungry things. Feeding is your biggest challenge right now. You need to eat constantly to grow, but you're so small that your prey is essentially microscopic. You hunt for other plankton, tiny copepods, algae, whatever you can fit into your minuscule mouth. It's not glamorous work. You drift through the water, mouth open, hoping to bump into something edible. Most of the time, you miss. Sometimes something bumps into you instead, and that's usually bad news. The ocean is a hostile place for something your size. Temperature changes that would barely register to a larger fish can kill you outright. A sudden current can sweep you into waters where there's no food, and you'll starve before you can find your way back. Storms churn the surface far above you, but even down here, you feel the effects as the water moves and shifts in ways that can scatter you across miles of empty ocean. But somehow, you keep growing. Your spines start to recede as your body begins to take on a more fish-like shape. You're still ridiculously small, but you're getting bigger every day. Your fins are developing, though they're still pathetic by any reasonable standard. You can move through the water now, not just drift with the current. It's not fast movement, and it's not particularly graceful, but it's movement nonetheless. As you grow, your diet starts to expand. You can handle slightly larger prey now, small crustaceans, fish larvae, bits of organic matter floating in the water. You're still basically eating whatever you can catch, but at least you have some choice in the matter. Your mouth is getting bigger too, which helps, though it still has that permanently surprised expression that will define your entire species. Other larval sunfish drift through the water around you, but you don't interact with them much. This isn't a social stage of your development. Everyone is focused on the same basic goals: eat, grow, and try not to get eaten. Some of your siblings are growing faster than you, which makes them both more capable of survival and bigger targets for predators. Others are lagging behind, getting smaller and weaker until they simply disappear one day. The transformation you're undergoing is gradual but dramatic. Your body is stretching and changing shape, preparing for the massive growth spurt that's coming. Your fins are becoming more pronounced, though they'll never be what you'd call impressive. Your tail fin, or what passes for one, is developing into the stubby, almost comical appendage that will barely propel you through the water for the rest of your life. Predation pressure is constant. Everything in the ocean that's bigger than you wants to eat you, and that's almost everything. You learn to recognize the shadows that mean danger, the dark shapes moving above you that could be birds diving for fish, the sleek forms cutting through the water that could be anything from small fish to massive predators. So, your best defense is still your size. You're small enough that many predators simply don't notice you. But that also means you're vulnerable to things that other fish your age wouldn't even worry about. The open ocean is a desert in many ways. There are vast stretches where food is scarce, where the water is clear and blue and almost empty of life. You drift through these areas, burning energy you can't afford to lose, searching for the patches of productivity where plankton blooms and feeding opportunities exist. When you find these areas, it's like discovering an oasis. The water is thick with food, and you eat until you can barely move. Your growth rate during this phase is incredible, even though you're still tiny by adult sunfish standards. You're doubling in size regularly, your body adapting to the challenges of life in the open ocean. Your digestive system is developing to handle the variety of prey you encounter. Your swim bladder is adjusting to help you control your position in the water column. Everything about you is changing, preparing for the next phase of your life. But growth comes with its own problems. The bigger you get, the more energy you need, which means you need to find more food. You're also becoming a more attractive target for predators. The spines that protected you as a larva are mostly gone now, replaced by the smooth, somewhat ridiculous body plan that will define your adult life. You're faster than you were, but not by much. You're tougher, but still vulnerable to anything with serious teeth. Navigation is becoming important now. The ocean currents that carried you as a helpless larva are still affecting your movement, but you have some ability to choose your direction. You don't have a specific destination in mind. That kind of complex behavior is still beyond you, but you can follow food sources, avoid dangerous areas, and generally make decisions about where to go next. The water around you is getting warmer as you drift toward more temperate regions. This isn't by accident. Sunfish tend to follow thermal gradients, seeking out the temperatures that allow for optimal growth and feeding. The warmer water brings different types of prey, different challenges, and different opportunities. You're starting to encounter other juvenile sunfish more frequently now. You're all following similar paths through the ocean, drawn by the same environmental cues and feeding opportunities. There's no real social interaction yet. You're not schooling or communicating, but there's a kind of loose association as you all move through the same general areas. Your body is preparing for something remarkable. Deep inside your developing frame, changes are taking place that will soon transform you from a small, vulnerable juvenile into something much larger and more capable. Your bones are strengthening, your muscles are developing, and your internal organs are scaling up to support the massive fish you're destined to become. The transition from juvenile to adult sunfish is not marked by any single event. It's a gradual process that happens over months, with your body slowly taking on the characteristics that will define your adult life. Your fins are reaching their final proportions, which is to say, they remain disappointingly small relative to your body size. Your mouth is developing its permanent expression of mild confusion. Your skin is thickening to protect you from the parasites and predators you'll encounter as an adult. Food is becoming less of a constant crisis and more of a manageable challenge. You're big enough now to target larger prey, though you're still limited by your body design and swimming ability. You can't chase down fast-moving fish or dive to great depths to hunt bottom-dwelling creatures. Instead, you're developing into a specialist, focusing on the types of prey that match your capabilities. The ocean around you is vast and full of opportunities, but also full of dangers that are scaling up with your size. The small predators that threatened you as a larva are no longer a concern, but they've been replaced by much larger and more dangerous hunters. Sharks patrol these waters, their keen senses detecting the electromagnetic signatures of living things. Seals and sea lions move through the area, their powerful jaws capable of taking massive bites out of anything they catch. But you're growing, adapting, and somehow thriving in this hostile environment. Your ridiculous body plan is actually working, despite all evidence to the contrary. You're becoming living proof that evolution doesn't always produce elegant solutions. Sometimes, it just produces solutions that work well enough to get the job done. As you continue growing, you start to realize that being a sunfish in the open ocean is like being a floating target with a sign that says free meal. You're now about the size of a dinner plate, which sounds impressive until you remember that dinner plates don't typically have to worry about being eaten by everything else on the table. Your body has settled into its final, ridiculous proportions, basically a swimming oval with fins that look like afterthoughts and a face that perpetually suggests you've just been asked a difficult math question. The warming waters have brought you into contact with one of the ocean's most abundant and annoying residents, jellyfish. These gelatinous blobs drift through the water like living nightmares, their tentacles trailing behind them, loaded with enough venom to kill creatures much larger than your current size. For most fish, jellyfish represent a serious threat to be avoided at all costs. For you, they're about to become lunch. Your first encounter with a jellyfish is accidental. You're drifting along, minding your own business, and probably looking confused about something when you bump into what feels like a slimy, transparent wall. It's a moon jelly, its bell pulsing slowly as it moves through the water. The tentacles brush against your skin, and you feel the sharp sting of nematocysts firing their tiny harpoons into your flesh. For most fish, this would be the beginning of the end. For you, it's apparently just Tuesday. Here's where things get weird. The venom that should be paralyzing you is barely registering. Your thick skin and developing immune system are shrugging off toxins that would drop other fish in seconds. Instead of fleeing in terror, you do something that would make marine biologists question everything they know about predator-prey relationships. You start eating the jellyfish. Your technique is about as elegant as everything else you do, which is to say it's not elegant at all. You approach the jellyfish like you're trying to figure out how to use chopsticks for the first time. Your small mouth takes tentative bites at the bell, each bite releasing more venom that you continue to ignore completely. The jellyfish, for its part, seems genuinely confused about what's happening. Its nervous system, such as it is, probably never evolved to deal with something this determined to eat it, despite being stung repeatedly. You work your way through the jellyfish methodically, like someone eating a particularly challenging sandwich. Bits of gelatinous tissue drift away from your feeding, attracting small scavengers that dart in to grab the scraps. You don't pay them any attention. You're completely focused on your meal, occasionally pausing to work a particularly large piece down your throat. When you're finished, you've consumed an entire moon jelly that was nearly as large as you are. Your stomach is distended, giving you an even more ridiculous appearance than usual. But here's the remarkable part. You're fine. Better than fine, actually. You're full, satisfied, and ready to find another jellyfish to massacre. This feeding behavior marks a turning point in your development. You've discovered your ecological niche, and it's one of the strangest niches in the ocean. While other fish are carefully avoiding jellyfish, you're actively seeking them out. Your body seems specifically designed for this bizarre lifestyle, even though that design looks like it was created by someone who had only heard fish described secondhand. Jellyfish hunting becomes your specialty, though hunting might be too generous a term. It's more like aggressive bumping into things that happen to be jellyfish. You develop a technique that involves approaching jellyfish from below, where their tentacles are less concentrated, then working your way up the bell in a spiral pattern. It's not pretty, but it works. Different species of jellyfish present different challenges. Portuguese man-o'-wars drift at the surface, their painful tentacles streaming behind them like toxic ribbons. Most marine animals give these creatures a wide berth, but you've apparently never learned the meaning of fear. You approach them with the same determined confusion that characterizes everything you do, somehow managing to avoid the worst of their stings while systematically dismantling them. Blue blubber jellies travel in massive blooms, turning entire sections of ocean into gelatinous minefields. When you encounter these blooms, it's like discovering an all-you-can-eat buffet that fights back. You move through the swarm methodically, eating your way from one jelly to the next, occasionally getting tangled in tentacles, but never seeming particularly bothered by the experience. Your feeding activities don't go unnoticed. Other marine animals start to associate your presence with jellyfish blooms, and some begin following you around like you're leading a toxic parade. Small fish dart in to grab scraps from your meals, while larger predators circle at a distance, waiting to see if your jellyfish consumption will eventually poison you. Spoiler alert, it won't. The relationship between you and jellyfish becomes one of the ocean's strangest ecological partnerships. You provide population control for jellyfish blooms that might otherwise overwhelm local ecosystems, while the jellyfish provide you with a reliable food source that most other animals can't or won't exploit. It's a perfect match, assuming you define perfect as bizarre and slightly disturbing. As you grow larger, your appetite scales accordingly. A single jellyfish that would have been a full meal when you were smaller now barely registers as a snack. You start consuming multiple jellies per feeding session, sometimes eating continuously for hours as you work your way through a particularly dense bloom. Your digestive system has adapted to process the low nutrition, high water content of your gelatinous prey, though this means you need to eat almost constantly to maintain your energy levels. The open ocean lifestyle suits you, despite your apparent design flaws. Your slow swimming speed, which seems like a disadvantage, actually helps you sneak up on jellyfish. Your flat, disc-like body allows you to approach them from angles they don't expect. Your small fins, while useless for speed, provide just enough maneuverability to position yourself for optimal jellyfish consumption. But life in the open ocean isn't just about finding food. You're also constantly dealing with parasites that see your large, slow-moving body as prime real estate. Copepods attach themselves to your skin, digging in with their hooked appendages and feeding on your blood and tissue. Normally, fish deal with parasites by visiting cleaning stations where smaller fish remove the unwanted guests. You, however, have developed a different approach. When the parasite load becomes unbearable, you do something that looks absolutely insane. You swim to the surface and float on your side like you're dead. This behavior, called sunning, exposes your parasite-covered skin to direct sunlight and attracts seabirds. The birds, seeing what appears to be a free meal, land on you and begin picking off the parasites. You remain perfectly still during this process, allowing the birds to walk all over you while they clean your skin. From the bird's perspective, you're like a floating salad bar covered in tasty crustaceans. From your perspective, you're getting a full-service spa treatment. The arrangement works perfectly, except for the occasional bird that gets a little too enthusiastic and takes a chunk of your skin along with the parasites. You don't seem to mind. A little skin damage is apparently a small price to pay for parasite removal. This sunning behavior also serves another purpose: thermoregulation. Your large body mass makes it difficult to maintain optimal body temperature in the cold depths where you often feed. By floating at the surface and absorbing solar radiation, you can warm your body and increase your metabolic rate, which helps with digestion and general physiological processes. The surface waters bring their own dangers, though. Boat propellers pose a constant threat to anything large and slow-moving. You've probably had several close encounters with watercraft, their engines churning the water above you as you float peacefully just below the surface. Your hearing isn't particularly acute, so you often don't notice approaching boats until they're almost on top of you. Predators are always a concern, even at your current size. Large sharks patrol these waters, and while you're getting too big for most of them to swallow whole, they can still inflict serious damage with their powerful jaws. Your best defense is still your apparent inedibility. You're mostly cartilage and water, with very little muscle or fat that would make you an attractive meal. Most predators that investigate you quickly lose interest and move on to more nutritious targets. The seasonal migrations of jellyfish blooms keep you constantly on the move. You follow the currents and temperature gradients that bring together the massive concentrations of jellyfish that sustain you. This lifestyle has turned you into an accidental ocean traveler, covering thousands of miles as you drift from one feeding ground to the next. Your navigation skills are essentially non-existent. You don't have the magnetic sensing abilities of sea turtles or the celestial navigation skills of migrating birds. Instead, you rely on a combination of current following, temperature seeking, and what can only be described as dumb luck. Somehow, this haphazard approach to navigation works, and you consistently find yourself in the right place at the right time to encounter massive jellyfish blooms. The growth spurts continue as you consume increasingly large quantities of jellyfish. Your body is adding mass at an incredible rate, though it's mostly adding it in the least useful ways possible. You're becoming wider rather than longer, flatter rather than more streamlined. Your fins remain comically small relative to your body size, giving you the appearance of a massive floating pancake with tiny propellers. Other sunfish occasionally cross your path, and these encounters are about as awkward as you'd expect. Neither of you is particularly social or communicative, so you mostly just float near each other for a while, looking confused before drifting apart again. There's no territorial behavior, no aggressive displays, no apparent recognition that you're members of the same species. You're like two confused strangers who accidentally got on the same elevator and are now trying to avoid eye contact. The deep ocean is calling, though. As you grow larger and require more food, you'll need to venture into waters where the jellyfish blooms are thicker and more reliable. This means leaving the relatively safe surface waters and descending into the darker, more dangerous depths where the real giants of the ocean make their home. Your descent into the deeper waters marks the beginning of your most dangerous phase yet. The sunlit surface waters you've called home are fading above you as you sink into the twilight zone, where the ocean takes on an entirely different character. Here, the water is darker, colder, and filled with creatures that make your previous encounters look like a children's petting zoo. The pressure increases with every meter you descend, but your body handles it surprisingly well. Your swim bladder adjusts automatically, and your flexible skeleton adapts to the changing conditions without much complaint. It's one of the few things about your design that actually works as intended, though you probably don't appreciate the engineering marvel that allows you to casually swim between pressure zones that would crush most surface-dwelling creatures. Down here, the jellyfish are different. These aren't the simple moon jellies you've been munching on near the surface. These are deep-sea specialists with bioluminescent displays that turn feeding time into a light show. Siphonophores drift through the water like living galaxies, their bodies stretching for meters and covered in lights that pulse and flicker in patterns you can't begin to understand. When you bite into one of these creatures, it's like eating a chandelier that fights back with venomous fury. Your feeding technique has evolved to match the more challenging prey. You've learned to approach bioluminescent jellies from their blind spots, using their own light displays to mask your approach. It's probably the closest thing to actual hunting strategy you'll ever develop, though it still looks more like accidental bumping than deliberate predation. The deep water brings new parasites, and these ones are serious business. Giant isopods, looking like underwater pill bugs the size of footballs, occasionally latch onto your skin with their powerful claws. Unlike the surface parasites that were merely annoying, these creatures can inflict real damage. They burrow into your flesh, creating wounds that take weeks to heal and leave you vulnerable to infection. Your sunning behavior becomes even more important now. The trips to the surface aren't just about parasite removal anymore. They're essential for warming your body after extended periods in the cold depths. The temperature difference between the deep feeding grounds and the surface can be 30 degrees or more, and your massive body takes hours to adjust to the change. But the deep ocean holds rewards that make the risks worthwhile. Jellyfish blooms down here are spectacular affairs, with millions of individual animals pulsing through the water in synchronized waves. When you encounter one of these blooms, it's like discovering an underwater aurora made entirely of food. You can feed continuously for days, gorging yourself on gelatinous prey until your stomach is so distended you can barely swim. The competition is fiercer down here too. Other jellyfish specialists have claimed territories in the productive deep water zones, and not all of them are as passive as your fellow sunfish. Leatherback sea turtles cruise through the depths like living submarines, their massive flippers propelling them through the water with a grace you can only dream of achieving. When one of these giants decides to feed in your area, you have no choice but to wait your turn or find somewhere else to hunt. Your encounters with these leatherbacks are studies in contrast. They're perfectly designed for their lifestyle, with streamlined bodies, powerful swimming muscles, and sophisticated navigation systems that allow them to track jellyfish blooms across entire ocean basins. You, meanwhile, continue to look like evolution's rough draft, bumbling through the water with all the grace of a falling refrigerator. Yet somehow, you're holding your own in this competitive environment. Your ability to process jellyfish toxins that would incapacitate other animals gives you access to prey species that even the leatherbacks avoid. Portuguese man-o'-wars, with their excruciating stings, are just another menu item for you. Blue bottles, whose venom can hospitalize humans, barely register as you consume them by the dozen. The deep ocean is also where you encounter your first truly massive predators. Great white sharks patrol these waters, their keen senses detecting the electromagnetic fields generated by living creatures. When a great white investigates you, it's like being examined by a living torpedo with more teeth than a hardware store. The shark circles slowly, trying to determine whether you're worth the effort of an attack. Most of the time, the shark decides you're not. Your body composition works against you in terms of swimming ability, but in your favor when it comes to avoiding predation. You're mostly cartilage, water, and disappointment, not the high-fat, high-protein meal that apex predators prefer. The shark usually takes one experimental bite, realizes you taste like ocean-flavored cardboard, and moves on to find something more nutritious. When you do get bitten, the experience is surreal. The shark's teeth slice through your flesh like it's barely there, taking massive chunks out of your body. You should be dying, but instead, you just float there looking mildly inconvenienced by the whole affair. Your circulatory system is so diffuse and low pressure that you don't bleed out like a normal fish would. Instead, you heal slowly, regenerating the lost tissue over weeks or months. These shark encounters leave you with impressive scars, crescent-shaped bite marks that tell the story of your survival in the deep ocean. Other sunfish you encounter bear similar marks, like members of an exclusive club for fish that are too weird to die properly. The scars become part of your identity, proof that you've survived encounters that would kill more sensibly designed creatures. Your growth continues at an astounding rate as you feast on the abundant deep-water jellies. You're now approaching the size of a small car, though you're shaped more like a manhole cover with fins. Your weight is measured in hundreds of pounds, making you one of the heaviest bony fish in the ocean. Yet you still move through the water with all the athletic prowess of a floating garbage can. The physics of your existence become increasingly absurd as you grow larger. Your tiny fins are now so disproportionate to your body size that they look like decorative accessories rather than functional swimming appendages. Your tail fin, which should be your primary means of propulsion, is basically a small fan attached to a massive wall. Yet somehow, you continue to move through the water and find food. Navigation remains a mystery even to you. You drift through the ocean, following currents, temperature gradients, and what can only be described as wishful thinking. Your brain, such as it is, operates on the most basic of programs: find jellyfish, eat jellyfish, avoid being eaten, repeat. This simple approach to life has somehow carried you thousands of miles across the Pacific, though you have no idea where you've been or where you're going. The seasonal patterns of jellyfish blooms become the rhythm of your existence. You follow the great oceanic conveyor belts of current and temperature that create the conditions for massive jellyfish reproduction. When the conditions are right, the ocean explodes with gelatinous life, and you feast like there's no tomorrow. When the blooms fade, you drift through leaner times, surviving on scattered individuals and the occasional siphonophore. Your feeding behavior has attracted attention from marine researchers, though you're completely unaware of their interest. Satellites track your movements as you surface for your sunning sessions, and underwater cameras occasionally capture footage of your bizarre jellyfish consumption technique. To the scientific community, you're a living puzzle, a creature that seems to violate several basic principles of marine biology, yet continues to thrive in one of the ocean's most challenging environments. The deep ocean is also where you begin to encounter the truly alien creatures that inhabit the Earth's last frontier. Vampire squid drift through the water like living umbrellas, their bodies covered in photophores that create light displays more complex than anything humans have ever designed. Giant tube worms cluster around hydrothermal vents, feeding on bacteria and growing to enormous sizes in the complete absence of sunlight. These encounters give you perspective on your own place in the ocean's ecosystem. You're weird, certainly, but you're not alone in your weirdness. The deep ocean is full of creatures that seem to have been designed by aliens with a poor understanding of Earth biology. In this context, your flat, disc-like body and confused expression don't seem quite so out of place. Your interactions with other deep-sea creatures are limited by your simple behavioral repertoire. You don't hunt actively, so you don't compete with the sophisticated predators that stalk the depths. You don't form social groups, so you don't interfere with the complex social structures of deep-sea cephalopods. You just drift through their world like a large, harmless tourist, occasionally bumping into things and eating whatever jellyfish you encounter. The pressure of the deep ocean has begun to affect your body in subtle ways. Your tissues are more compressed, your movements are slightly slower, and your metabolism has shifted to accommodate the different conditions. Yet you adapt to these changes with the same blank acceptance that characterizes your approach to everything else. If jellyfish are available, you eat them. If predators approach, you ignore them until they go away. If the pressure increases, you adjust and continue floating. Your sunning behavior becomes more elaborate as you grow larger. The trips to the surface now require significant energy expenditure, and you need to spend longer periods floating at the surface to achieve the same warming effect. These extended sunning sessions turn you into a temporary island, attracting seabirds, small fish, and occasionally human observers who mistake you for floating debris until you suddenly move. The parasites you collect during your deep water excursions are becoming more exotic and troublesome. Deep-sea copepods with bioluminescent patches create light shows on your skin as they feed on your blood. Specialized worms burrow into your flesh and establish permanent colonies, turning parts of your body into living real estate for creatures that have never seen in sunlight. Your cleaning sessions with seabirds become more important as the parasite load increases. The birds that land on you during your sunning sessions have learned to recognize you as a reliable source of food, and some have apparently begun following you across the ocean. You've become the center of a small ecosystem, a floating platform that supports a variety of opportunistic species. The deep ocean is preparing you for the next phase of your life, though you have no awareness of what's coming. Your body is approaching sexual maturity, and with it will come instincts and behaviors that you've never experienced before. The simple existence of finding jellyfish and eating them is about to become much more complicated. For now, though, you continue your bizarre existence in the deep waters, a living testament to the fact that evolution doesn't always produce elegant solutions. Sometimes it just produces solutions that work well enough to survive, even if they look like they were designed by someone who had never seen a fish before and was working from a very poor description. The deep ocean has become your domain, but your body is preparing for something that will make all your previous adventures look like practice runs. Hormones are starting to course through your system, though you have no understanding of what they mean or what they're preparing you for. Your brain, already operating on the most basic of programs, is about to receive some new software updates that will fundamentally change your behavior. Sexual maturity in Sunfish doesn't announce itself with fanfare. There's no dramatic physical transformation, no sudden burst of intelligence or grace. Instead, it creeps up on you like everything else in your life. Gradually, and with very little fanfare, you continue eating jellyfish and looking confused, but deep inside your massive body, your reproductive organs are developing and preparing for their moment in the spotlight. The first sign that something is changing comes in the form of restlessness. You've always been a drifter, following currents and jellyfish blooms without any particular destination in mind. But now there's something else pulling at you, a biological imperative that you can't identify but can't ignore. You find yourself moving toward warmer waters, though you have no conscious understanding of why. The migration takes you across thousands of miles of open ocean, following ancient routes that sunfish have traveled for millions of years. You're not navigating in any conventional sense. You still have no idea where you are or where you're going. Instead, you're following chemical gradients, temperature cues, and magnetic fields that your primitive nervous system can detect but not comprehend. As you travel, you encounter other sunfish making the same journey. These meetings are as awkward as all your previous encounters with your own species, but now there's an additional element of biological tension that neither of you understands. You float near each other for longer periods, occasionally bumping into one another in what might generously be called social interaction if you ignored the fact that both parties look completely bewildered by the experience. The warmer waters bring different challenges and opportunities. Tropical jellyfish species appear on your menu, creatures with exotic toxins and bizarre body plans that would challenge even your impressive poison tolerance. Fire jellies drift through the water like translucent flames, their stings capable of causing excruciating pain to any creature foolish enough to touch them. You, naturally, eat them with your usual expression of mild confusion. Your size is now truly impressive, approaching the dimensions of a compact car, but with the aerodynamics of a thrown brick. Your weight has increased to over 1,000 pounds, making you one of the largest bony fish in the ocean. Yet your tiny fins continue to propel you through the water with all the efficiency of trying to paddle a canoe with teaspoons. The tropical waters are more crowded than the deep ocean you've grown accustomed to. Coral reefs create underwater cities teeming with life, though you're too large and clumsy to navigate their narrow passages. Instead, you cruise the edges of these ecosystems like a confused tourist, occasionally blundering into shallow areas where you become temporarily stranded until the tide lifts you free. Your sunning behavior becomes a spectacle in these warmer waters. When you surface to bask and remove parasites, you attract attention from dolphins, sea turtles, and even whale sharks that approach to investigate the strange floating disc that's appeared in their territory. Some of these encounters are peaceful, with curious animals circling you at a respectful distance. Others are more problematic, particularly when territorial species decide your presence is unwelcome. A group of bottlenose dolphins discovers you during one of your sunning sessions, and their reaction is typical of intelligent creatures encountering something that defies explanation. They circle you repeatedly, clicking and whistling among themselves in what sounds suspiciously like underwater laughter. One brave dolphin approaches close enough to nudge you with its rostrum, apparently testing whether you're alive or just a very large piece of floating debris. Your response to this investigation is characteristically underwhelming. You barely acknowledge the dolphin's presence, continuing to float motionlessly as they conduct their examination. This lack of reaction seems to frustrate the dolphins, who are accustomed to more dynamic interactions with other marine life. Eventually, they lose interest and swim away, leaving you to continue your sunning in peace. But the tropical waters hold dangers that the open ocean couldn't match. Tiger sharks patrol these regions, and unlike the great whites you've encountered before, tigers are less discriminating in their dietary choices. They're known to eat almost anything, including things that most predators would avoid. When a large female tiger shark investigates you, the encounter takes on a more serious tone than your previous shark meetings. The tiger shark circles you with predatory intent, her movements purposeful and calculating. She's large enough to inflict serious damage and hungry enough to consider taking a chance on your questionable nutritional value. You continue floating with your usual oblivious calm, apparently unaware that you're being sized up for a meal. The attack, when it comes, is swift and brutal. The shark's jaws clamp down on your side, her serrated teeth slicing through your flesh like it's barely there. You should be screaming, thrashing, bleeding out in the tropical water. Instead, you just sort of deflate slightly, like a punctured beach ball that's mildly annoyed by the inconvenience. The shark releases you almost immediately, her expression, if sharks can be said to have expressions, suggesting profound disappointment. You taste terrible. Your flesh has the consistency of wet cardboard, and your blood pressure is so low that you're barely bleeding despite the massive wound she's just inflicted. She swims away in search of something more appetizing, leaving you with another impressive scar to add to your collection. Your healing process is as bizarre as everything else about your biology. The wound doesn't close quickly like it would in most fish. Instead, your body simply adjusts to the new configuration. The damaged tissue reorganizes itself, blood flow reroutes around the injured area, and gradually, over weeks, new flesh grows to fill the gap. You continue eating jellyfish throughout this process, apparently unbothered by the fact that you're missing a significant chunk of your body. The warm tropical waters are where you first encounter others of your species who are ready to breed, though recognizing this requires a level of biological sophistication that your simple nervous system struggles to achieve. The female sunfish you encounter are massive, even larger than you, their bodies swollen with developing eggs. They move through the water with the same graceless determination that characterizes all sunfish, but now there's a sense of purpose to their movements. Your first attempt at courtship is about as smooth as everything else you do, which is to say it's completely disastrous. You approach a female with no clear plan, bumping into her repeatedly in what might charitably be called flirting if you ignored the fact that both participants look like they're trying to solve a difficult puzzle. She tolerates your presence for a while before swimming away, leaving you floating alone and presumably wondering what went wrong. Mating behavior in sunfish is not exactly what you'd call romantic. There's no elaborate courtship display, no intricate dance, no demonstration of superior genes through competitive behavior. Instead, there's a lot of confused bumping, some uncertain hovering, and eventually, if you're lucky, a brief moment of biological cooperation that results in fertilization. The process is made more complicated by your ridiculous body plan. Your tiny fins make precise maneuvering nearly impossible. Your flat profile means you can't align properly with your partner, and your general lack of swimming ability turns what should be a natural behavior into an exercise in aquatic slapstick. Somehow, though, sunfish have been managing this process for millions of years, which suggests that evolution has a sense of humor. When you finally succeed in finding a receptive female and managing the complex logistics of sunfish reproduction. The result is spectacular in its scale. The female releases millions upon millions of eggs into the water, more eggs than any other vertebrate produces. You release your sperm to fertilize them, and suddenly the water around you is clouded with the next generation of sunfish. Your parental responsibilities end at fertilization. There's no nest building, no guarding of eggs, no caring for young. You and the female simply swim away in different directions, leaving the fertilized eggs to drift on the currents just as you once did. It's not exactly a touching family moment, but it's efficient in its own bizarre way. The spawning process leaves you exhausted and somewhat deflated, literally. Your body needs time to recover from the massive energy expenditure of reproduction, and your appetite increases even beyond its already impressive levels. You resume your jellyfish hunting with renewed vigor, consuming massive quantities of gelatinous prey to rebuild your energy reserves. But reproduction has changed something in your simple brain. You now have experience with one of the fundamental drives of life, even if you don't understand what it means. The next time you encounter potential mates, your responses are slightly more coordinated, your movements marginally more purposeful. You're still hopeless at courtship by any reasonable standard, but you're marginally less hopeless than you were before. The tropical waters continue to challenge you in new ways. Cleaner fish approach during your sunning sessions, tiny colorful fish that specialize in removing parasites from larger animals. You've never experienced this service before, and your initial reaction is typical sunfish confusion. The small fish dart around your body, picking off parasites and dead skin, while you float motionlessly trying to process what's happening. Eventually, you adapt to this new experience, learning to position yourself to give the cleaner fish access to the most parasite-heavy areas of your body. It's more efficient than relying solely on seabirds for parasite removal, and the small fish can reach areas that birds can't access. You become a regular client at these underwater cleaning stations, floating patiently while teams of tiny fish work to remove your unwanted passengers. Your presence in the tropical ecosystem doesn't go unnoticed by marine researchers. Scientists studying sunfish behavior have been tracking your movements via satellite tags attached during your sunning sessions, though you remain completely unaware of their interest. Your migration patterns, feeding behavior, and reproduction cycles are providing valuable data about one of the ocean's most mysterious large fish. The research reveals just how remarkable your species really is. Despite your apparent design flaws, sunfish play important ecological roles as jellyfish population controllers and as hosts for diverse parasite communities. Your ability to dive to extreme depths while maintaining surface access makes you a biological bridge between different ocean zones. You're a living example of how evolution can produce successful solutions that look completely wrong from a human engineering perspective. Your post-reproduction life settles into familiar patterns, but with new complexities. The drive to reproduce will return seasonally, bringing with it migrations to spawning grounds and encounters with other sexually mature sunfish. Between breeding seasons, you continue your bizarre existence as a jellyfish-eating, parasite-hosting, confusion-expressing giant of the ocean. The tropical waters eventually give way to more temperate zones as you follow your internal compass toward new feeding grounds. The jellyfish populations in these areas are different again, adapted to different temperatures and conditions. You adapt your feeding strategies accordingly, though strategy might be too sophisticated a term for your approach of swimming into jellyfish and eating them. Your size continues to increase slowly, though you're approaching the upper limits of what your body plan can sustain. Each pound of additional weight makes swimming more difficult, puts more stress on your tiny fins, and requires more energy to maintain. You're becoming a victim of your own success, growing so large that basic movement becomes increasingly challenging. But you persist, as sunfish have for millions of years, proving that sometimes the most unlikely solutions are also the most enduring ones. Your ridiculous body plan, confused expression, and bizarre lifestyle have carried you through one of the ocean's most challenging environments and allowed you to successfully reproduce. You may not look like much, but you're a survivor in the truest sense of the word. The ocean stretches endlessly around you, full of jellyfish to eat, parasites to collect, and predators to confuse with your apparent indestructibility. Your life as a sunfish is far from over, and the adventures ahead promise to be just as weird, wonderful, and inexplicable as everything that's come before. Your post-reproductive recovery period is surprisingly brief for something your size. Sakes, dogs. Within a few weeks of spawning, your appetite returns with a vengeance, and you're back to consuming jellyfish with the same methodical determination that's carried you this far. The tropical waters continue to provide abundant feeding opportunities, though the species composition changes as you drift through different current systems. A new challenge emerges as you encounter your first major jellyfish bloom in months. This isn't just any bloom, it's a massive aggregation of barrel jellies, creatures nearly as large as you are. Each individual jelly is a translucent giant, pulsing through the water with slow, hypnotic contractions. For most predators, these jellies would represent an impossible meal due to their size and potent stings. For you, they're basically floating birthday cakes with extra frosting. Your approach to consuming a barrel jelly is a masterclass in determined inefficiency. You can't swallow one whole like you would a smaller species, so you have to develop a new technique. You begin by taking experimental bites around the edge of the bell, working your way inward like someone eating a particularly challenging pizza. The jelly's stings fire continuously as you feed, coating your mouth and throat with enough venom to kill a small whale. You barely notice. The feeding process takes hours. You methodically work your way through the massive jelly, pausing occasionally to rest or to process what you've already consumed. Other marine animals give you a wide berth during these feeding sessions, apparently recognizing that you're engaged in something that defies all reasonable biological behavior. Even the sharks seem confused by your commitment to eating things that should be killing you. Your digestive system has evolved to handle this bizarre diet, but even it has limits. After consuming several barrel jellies in rapid succession, you become so bloated that you can barely maintain your position in the water column. Your already questionable swimming ability is further compromised by your distended stomach, turning you into something that resembles a living blimp more than a fish. The bloating forces you to alter your behavior temporarily. Instead of actively seeking out more jellyfish, you drift passively with the current, allowing your digestive system time to process the massive meal you've consumed. During these recovery periods, you become even more vulnerable to predators, but your apparent inedibility continues to protect you from serious attacks. A group of pilot whales discovers you during one of these post-feeding stupors. These intelligent marine mammals are known for their curiosity and problem-solving abilities, and you present them with a puzzle they've never encountered before. They circle you repeatedly, using echolocation to map your internal structure and trying to determine exactly what kind of creature you are. The pilot whale's sonar clicks and whistles create a constant background noise as they conduct their investigation. You remain motionless, either because you're too full to move or because you've learned that staying still is usually the best response to curious predators. The whales seem particularly interested in your flat profile and tiny fins, nudging you gently with their rostrums as if trying to understand how such a design could possibly be functional. Eventually, the whales lose interest and move on, leaving you to continue your recovery in peace. But their investigation has attracted attention from other marine life. A school of remoras approaches, their sucker discs seeking attachment points on your smooth skin. These hitchhiking fish normally attach to sharks and rays, but they're apparently willing to experiment with unusual hosts. The remora's attempts to attach to you are only partially successful. Your skin is thicker than most fish, and your body shape doesn't provide the ideal attachment surfaces that these parasitic fish prefer. Several manage to find purchase along your dorsal edge, but others slide off repeatedly as they try to maintain their grip on your curved surface. Your relationship with the remoras becomes another example of the weird ecological partnerships that seem to define your existence. The fish that successfully attach to you benefit from your travels through jellyfish-rich waters, feeding on scraps from your meals and on the parasites that constantly plague your skin. In return, they provide some cleaning services, though their effectiveness is limited by their small numbers and your massive surface area. The warm tropical waters begin to change as you drift into a different current system. The temperature drops gradually, and the jellyfish species you encounter shift from tropical specialists to more temperate forms. This transition zone is particularly rich in marine life, with species from different regions mixing and creating exceptional feeding opportunities. Your size has now reached truly impressive proportions. You're approaching 1,500 pounds, making you one of the largest sunfish ever recorded. Your disc-like body spans nearly 10 feet from fin tip to fin tip, though your actual swimming appendages remain comically small relative to your bulk. You've become a living example of what happens when evolution prioritizes mass over mobility. The physics of your existence are becoming increasingly absurd. Your tiny fins are now so inadequate for propelling your massive body that you rely almost entirely on ocean currents for movement. You can still swim when necessary, but your top speed has dropped to something that makes sea turtles look like speedboats. Your turning radius has expanded to roughly the size of a football field, yet somehow you continue to thrive. Your feeding efficiency has actually improved with size, as your larger mouth allows you to consume bigger jellyfish more quickly. Your parasite load has stabilized at a level that would horrify smaller fish, but seems manageable for your massive frame. Your healing ability remains remarkable, with old shark bite scars serving as testament to your durability. A new type of predator enters your story as you drift through the deeper waters of the transition zone. Six-gill sharks patrol these depths, ancient creatures that predate most modern fish species by millions of years. These living fossils are massive, slow-moving predators that specialize in scavenging and opportunistic feeding. When a large six-gill investigates you, the encounter has a different quality than your previous shark meetings. The six-gills approaches you with the patient confidence of an apex predator that has survived since the age of dinosaurs. Its primitive brain processes your unusual appearance and apparent vulnerability, calculating whether you're worth the energy expenditure of an attack. You float motionlessly as the shark circles, your expression maintaining its characteristic look of mild bewilderment. The six-gill's investigation is thorough and methodical. It bumps you with its snout, testing your reactions and trying to determine your threat level. You respond with your usual strategy of doing absolutely nothing, which seems to confuse the ancient predator. After several minutes of circling and testing, the sixth gill makes its decision and moves on, apparently concluding that you're either too weird to eat or not worth the effort. Your encounters with deep-sea predators are becoming more frequent as you spend more time in the darker waters below the thermocline. Giant Pacific octopi occasionally investigate you during their nocturnal hunting forays, their intelligent eyes studying your bizarre form with what might be curiosity or confusion. These interactions are typically brief, as the octopi quickly determine that you don't fit into any of their usual prey categories. The deep waters also bring you into contact with other large jellyfish specialists. Leatherback sea turtles cruise through these depths with far more grace and purpose than you can manage, their streamlined bodies and powerful flippers making them highly efficient jellyfish hunters. When you encounter these magnificent reptiles, the contrast in design philosophy is stark. The leatherbacks seem to regard you with something approaching pity. They're perfectly adapted for their ecological niche, with every aspect of their anatomy optimized for deep diving and jellyfish consumption. You, on the other hand, look like evolution's attempt at creating a jellyfish predator using only spare parts and wishful thinking. Yet both approaches are successful, proving that there are many ways to solve the same biological problem. Your feeding behavior continues to evolve as you encounter new jellyfish species in the deeper waters. Atolla jellyfish create spectacular bioluminescent displays when threatened, turning the water around them into a galaxy of pulsing lights. Your consumption of these creatures turns feeding time into a light show, with your mouth and throat glowing from within as you process the luminescent prey. The bioluminescence creates an unexpected side effect. For several hours after feeding on light-producing jellies, you emit a faint glow from your digestive system. This internal illumination makes you visible to predators and prey alike, though it doesn't seem to affect your survival significantly. Most creatures that encounter a glowing sunfish apparently decide they've seen enough weirdness for one day and move on. Your size is beginning to present new challenges beyond simple mobility issues. The sheer mass of your body is putting increasing stress on your skeletal system, such as it is. Sunfish skeletons are largely cartilaginous, which provides flexibility but limited structural support for creatures of your dimensions. You're approaching the theoretical limits of how large a fish can grow while maintaining basic functionality. The stress manifests in subtle ways. Your movements become even more restricted, your response times slow further, and your ability to react to threats diminishes. You're becoming less of a fish and more of a living reef, a massive biological structure that serves as habitat and food source for smaller organisms while struggling to maintain basic life functions. Your sunning behavior adapts to accommodate your increased size. The energy required to reach the surface is now substantial, and you need to spend longer periods basking to achieve the same warming and cleaning effects. These extended sunning sessions turn you into a temporary island ecosystem, with seabirds establishing temporary colonies on your back and small fish sheltering in your shadow. The bird cleaning services become more elaborate as your parasite load scales with your size. Entire flocks of seabirds work simultaneously to remove the copepods, barnacles, and other hitchhikers that cover your skin. The birds have learned to coordinate their efforts with different species specializing in different types of parasites. You've become the center of a complex ecological interaction network. Your passive nature during these cleaning sessions has led to some unusual partnerships. Small fish now join the birds in parasite removal, darting in and out of the gaps between your fins to access areas the birds can't reach. Cleaner wrasses work alongside gulls and petrels in an unlikely interspecies cooperation that benefits everyone involved except the parasites. The tropical transition zone is also where you encounter your first major human interaction. A research vessel conducting deep-sea surveys discovers you during one of your extended sunning sessions. The scientists on board are initially unsure what they're looking at, as sunfish of your size are rarely observed at the surface in these waters. The research team decides to tag you with a satellite transmitter, a procedure that requires careful coordination. They approach slowly in a small boat, trying not to startle you into diving before they can attach the device. You remain characteristically motionless during the entire process, apparently unaware that you're about to become part of a long-term scientific study. The tagging procedure itself is anticlimactic. One of the researchers leans over the side of the boat and simply attaches the transmitter to your dorsal fin using a quick-release mechanism. You show no reaction to this intrusion, continuing to float peacefully as the research team takes measurements and photographs. From your perspective, it's just another minor inconvenience in a life full of strange encounters. The satellite tag will track your movements for the next several years, providing scientists with unprecedented data about sunfish migration patterns and behavior. You remain completely unaware of your contribution to marine science, continuing your existence with the same blank determination that's carried you this far. Your post-tagging life continues much as before, with the addition of a small electronic device that occasionally transmits your location to satellites orbiting hundreds of miles overhead. The tag doesn't affect your behavior or movement patterns, though it does attract some additional parasites that find the device's surface suitable for colonization. The deep waters of the transition zone continue to provide abundant feeding opportunities, though the jellyfish species composition changes with the seasons and current patterns. You adapt to these changes with your usual flexibility, which is to say you eat whatever jellyfish you encounter without much regard for species identification or nutritional optimization. Your massive size has begun to attract attention from marine megafauna that normally wouldn't interact with fish. Sperm whales occasionally investigate you during their deep diving forays, their massive bulbous heads dwarfing even your impressive dimensions. These encounters are typically brief, as the whales quickly determine that you're not squid and therefore not of interest to them. The whale encounters provide perspective on your place in the ocean's size hierarchy. You're undoubtedly large by fish standards, but in the context of marine megafauna, you're merely medium-sized. The realization that there are creatures in the ocean that could swallow you whole adds a new dimension to your survival strategies, though your response remains characteristically passive. Your feeding efficiency reaches new heights as you learn to take advantage of the deep water jellyfish aggregations that form along thermal boundaries. These concentrations can contain millions of individual jellies packed into relatively small areas, creating feeding opportunities that allow you to consume massive quantities of prey with minimal energy expenditure. The thermal boundary zones also serve as highways for your limited mobility. By positioning yourself along these boundaries, you can drift with the current systems while remaining in jellyfish-rich waters. It's an energy-efficient lifestyle that maximizes feeding opportunities while minimizing the swimming effort required to maintain your position. Your reproductive cycle is preparing to reset as hormonal changes begin to influence your behavior once again. The drive to spawn will soon return, bringing with it the need to locate suitable breeding grounds and compatible partners. The process will be just as awkward and inefficient as your previous reproductive efforts, but somehow it will work. The cycle of your life as a sunfish continues with the same bizarre consistency that has defined your existence from the beginning. You remain a living contradiction, a massive predator that looks helpless, a successful species that seems poorly designed, a survivor that appears to be constantly on the verge of biological failure. Yet you persist, thriving in one of Earth's most challenging environments through sheer determination and an apparent immunity to the normal rules of marine biology. Your massive body has become a testament to the ocean's ability to support life forms that seem to defy common sense. At nearly 2,000 pounds, you're now approaching the absolute upper limits of what your ridiculous anatomy can sustain. Your fins, already laughably inadequate, now look like toothpicks attached to a dinner table. Yet somehow, you continue to function, drifting through the deep waters like a living monument to evolution's willingness to experiment with truly bizarre solutions. The deep ocean currents have carried you into new territories where the water takes on an almost alien quality. Bioluminescent creatures drift past like living stars, their bodies pulsing with cold light that illuminates the darkness around you. Giant siphonophores stretch through the water like transparent ribbons, their stinging cells creating deadly barriers that would stop most predators cold. You, naturally, swim straight through them, collecting stings by the thousands while maintaining your expression of perpetual, mild confusion. Your encounters with these deep-sea light shows have turned feeding time into something resembling an underwater rave. When you bite into a particularly large luminescent jelly, your entire digestive system lights up from the inside, creating a glow that can be seen from hundreds of feet away. The effect lasts for hours, turning you into a living beacon that attracts curious creatures from across the deep ocean. A group of deep-sea anglerfish discovers you during one of these glowing episodes. These prehistoric-looking predators, with their massive mouths and bioluminescent lures, approach cautiously to investigate the strange light emanating from your body. They circle you like tiny submarines, their grotesque faces studying your illuminated form with what might be professional interest. You ignore them completely, continuing to process your luminescent meal while they conduct their examination. The anglerfish eventually lose interest and disappear back into the darkness, but their visit highlights just how unusual your existence has become. You're now large enough to serve as a landmark for deep-sea navigation, a glowing waypoint that other creatures can use to orient themselves in the featureless abyss. It's not a role you asked for, but then again, nothing about your life has involved much personal choice. Your healing abilities continue to amaze even yourself, though amazement might be too sophisticated an emotion for your simple nervous system. A recent encounter with a particularly aggressive cookie-cutter shark left you with several perfectly round wounds scattered across your body. These small but deep bite marks should have been serious injuries, but your body treats them like minor inconveniences. The wounds seal themselves within days, and within weeks, new tissue has grown to fill the gaps completely. The cookie-cutter sharks have apparently spread word about your unusual properties through whatever communication network deep-sea predators use. More of them arrive to test their teeth against your seemingly indestructible hide, each taking their perfectly circular bite before swimming away in apparent disappointment. You now bear dozens of these round scars, giving you the appearance of having been attacked by a very precise hole punch. Your parasite community has evolved into something resembling a mobile ecosystem. The various copepods, barnacles, and other hitchhikers that cover your skin have established complex relationships with each other, creating a miniature food web that uses your body as its foundation. Some parasites feed directly on your blood and tissue, others hunt the parasites that feed on you, and still others scavenge the waste products of the entire community. The diversity of life forms using your body as habitat would impress marine biologists if they could catalog them all. Tiny worms burrow through your skin, creating tunnel networks that house even smaller organisms. Microscopic algae grow in the protected spaces between your scales, photosynthesizing in the filtered light that reaches the shallow depths where you occasionally venture. You've become a living island, supporting dozens of species in a complex web of interdependence. Your sunning behavior has evolved to accommodate this ecosystem. When you surface for your cleaning sessions, the birds that land on you have learned to work around the various permanent residents that call your body home. Some parasites retreat into deeper burrows when birds approach, while others remain exposed, apparently having reached some kind of evolutionary accommodation with their aerial predators. The cleaning sessions themselves have become elaborate productions involving multiple species working in coordination. Seabirds handle the larger external parasites. Small fish dart in to grab organisms in hard-to-reach areas, and specialized cleaner shrimp work the deeper crevices where neither birds nor fish can access. You float motionlessly through these sessions like a patient undergoing surgery, occasionally shifting position to provide better access to particularly infested areas. Your satellite tag continues to transmit your location to researchers who are building an increasingly detailed picture of sunfish behavior and migration patterns. The data shows that you're following ancient oceanic highways, riding current systems that have carried your species across the Pacific for millions of years. Your path traces a complex spiral that takes you through some of the ocean's most productive and most dangerous waters. The scientists tracking you have begun to recognize your individual movement patterns. Unlike other tagged sunfish that follow more predictable routes, your path shows signs of what they're calling adaptive wandering, a tendency to deviate from expected migration routes in response to local conditions. Whether this represents intelligence, instinct, or just random chance is still being debated in marine biology journals. Your size has begun to attract attention from creatures that normally wouldn't consider fish as potential prey. A pod of orcas encounters you during one of your deeper feeding excursions, their sophisticated sonar systems mapping your massive form with precision. These apex predators are known for their intelligence and adaptability, and they spend considerable time investigating your unusual properties. The orcas approach with the calculated curiosity of scientists studying an interesting specimen. They take turns bumping you with their rostrums, testing your reactions, and trying to determine whether you represent a threat, an opportunity, or simply an oddity to be cataloged. Your passive response seems to frustrate them. They're accustomed to prey that either fights or flees, not creatures that simply float there, looking mildly perplexed by the attention. One of the younger orcas becomes particularly interested in your tiny fins, nudging them repeatedly as if trying to understand how such inadequate appendages could possibly propel your massive body. The juvenile's investigations become increasingly vigorous until an adult intervenes, apparently deciding that you're neither dangerous nor particularly interesting. The pod moves on, leaving you to continue your jellyfish-focused existence. Your encounters with marine mammals are becoming more frequent, as your size and behavior patterns make you increasingly visible to the ocean's intelligent species. Pilot whales conduct detailed sonar surveys of your internal structure, apparently fascinated by your unusual anatomy. Sperm whales investigate you during their deep dives, their massive heads dwarfing even your impressive dimensions. These interactions provide glimpses into how other marine species perceive your existence. To the whales and dolphins, you seem to represent a biological puzzle, a creature that violates many of the normal rules of marine life, yet continues to thrive. Their investigations are thorough but respectful, as if they recognize that you're doing something important, even if they can't understand what it is. Your feeding behavior continues to evolve as you encounter new jellyfish species in the deeper waters. Crystal jellies create spectacular displays when you consume them, their bodies fracturing into thousands of light-producing fragments that illuminate your digestive system like internal fireworks. The effect is so dramatic that it attracts other predators from miles away, all coming to investigate the source of the underwater light show. A school of lanternfish arrives during one of these feeding displays, their own bioluminescent organs pulsing in apparent response to the light emanating from your body. The small fish circle you in complex patterns, creating a living constellation that moves through the dark water with hypnotic beauty. You ignore them completely, focused entirely on processing the massive crystal jelly that's causing all the excitement. Your digestive system has adapted to handle increasingly exotic prey. Salp chains, those strange colonial organisms that drift through the ocean like transparent trains, present unique challenges that you solve with typical sunfish elegance, which is to say, not elegantly at all. You simply swim into the middle of a salp chain and start eating your way along it, breaking the colony into fragments that scatter through the water. The deep ocean's seasonal rhythms are becoming more apparent as you spend more time in the abyssal zones. Vertical migrations bring different prey species within your reach at predictable intervals, though your understanding of these patterns is limited to recognizing when food becomes more or less available. You've learned to position yourself along thermal boundaries where these migrations converge, maximizing your feeding opportunities with minimal energy expenditure. Your reproductive system is preparing for another breeding cycle, though the process remains as mysterious to you as everything else in your life. Hormonal changes are beginning to affect your behavior in subtle ways, creating restlessness that drives you toward warmer waters where spawning conditions are optimal. The journey will take you across thousands of miles of open ocean, following routes encoded in your genes rather than your limited consciousness. The migration brings new challenges as you leave the familiar deep waters and venture into more populated oceanic regions. Commercial fishing vessels become a constant presence, their engines creating underwater noise that affects your primitive hearing. Some ships trail long lines that pose entanglement hazards for large, slow-moving fish like yourself. Your first encounter with a fishing operation is typically underwhelming from your perspective. You drift into an area where purse-seine nets are being deployed to catch tuna, your massive form appearing on the fisherman's sonar like a submarine. The crew initially mistakes you for debris or a small whale, only realizing their error when you surface for one of your sunning sessions. The fisherman's reaction to your appearance is a mixture of amazement and confusion. Sunfish of your size are rarely seen in these waters, and your bizarre anatomy challenges their understanding of marine life. They take photographs and videos, documenting what might be the largest sunfish ever recorded in this region. You remain characteristically oblivious to their excitement, continuing your sunning routine while they circle you in their boat. Your presence near commercial fishing operations creates unexpected complications. Your satellite tag identifies you as a research subject, which means the fishermen are legally required to report your location and avoid interfering with your natural behavior. This protection extends to a significant area around you, effectively creating a mobile marine sanctuary that moves with your wandering path. The fishing crews begin to recognize your distinctive profile and radio your location to other vessels in the area. You become something of a celebrity among the commercial fishing fleet, though you remain unaware of your fame. Your movements are tracked and reported, creating an informal network of observers who monitor your progress through their fishing grounds. Your size has reached the point where basic physics are working against you. The square cube law means that your mass is increasing faster than your strength, making every movement more difficult than it was when you were smaller. Your already inadequate fins are now comically insufficient for propelling your massive body through the water. You've become more dependent on ocean currents than ever before, drifting with the flow rather than swimming against it. The thermal regulation challenges of your massive size are becoming more apparent. Your core temperature takes hours to adjust to changes in water temperature, making rapid depth changes increasingly difficult. You've learned to move slowly between thermal layers, allowing your body time to adjust to the new conditions without shocking your system. Your healing abilities are being tested by increasingly frequent encounters with ship strikes. Large vessels occasionally collide with you during your sunning sessions, their hulls scraping across your back and leaving deep gouges in your flesh. These wounds would be fatal to most marine animals, but your body treats them as minor maintenance issues, sealing the damage and beginning regeneration within hours of the impact. The ship strike scars add to your growing collection of battle damage, creating a roadmap of your encounters with the modern ocean's hazards. Propeller cuts cross your back in parallel lines, while anchor chains have left deep impressions along your sides. You wear these marks like badges of honor, though honor is probably too complex a concept for your simple nervous system to grasp. Your parasite load has stabilized at levels that would overwhelm smaller fish, but seem manageable for your massive frame. The various organisms that call your body home have reached a kind of ecological equilibrium, with population levels regulated by the available resources and the periodic cleaning sessions that remove excess inhabitants. Some of your parasites have become so specialized for life on Sunfish that they can't survive anywhere else. These obligate symbionts have evolved alongside your species, developing life cycles that depend on your specific biology and behavior patterns. You've become a living ecosystem, supporting forms of life that exist nowhere else in the ocean. Your journey toward the spawning grounds continues with the same determined aimlessness that characterizes all your movements. You're following ancient migration routes encoded in your DNA, though you have no conscious awareness of your destination or purpose. The warm waters ahead hold the promise of reproduction, though the actual process will be just as awkward and inefficient as everything else you do. The ocean around you is changing as you move toward more temperate regions. The deep, cold waters give way to warmer, more productive seas, where life exists in greater abundance and diversity. New challenges await in these crowded waters, but also new opportunities for the bizarre lifestyle that has somehow carried you this far through one of the planet's most demanding environments. Your approach to the spawning grounds becomes increasingly erratic as hormonal changes flood your primitive nervous system with instructions you don't understand. The warm, productive waters teem with life that regards your massive presence with varying degrees of curiosity, alarm, and complete bewilderment. Schools of tuna part around you like silver curtains, their sleek bodies demonstrating everything your design is not: speed, grace, and apparent competence in basic fish activities. The spawning grounds themselves are located in a region where multiple ocean currents converge, creating ideal conditions for the survival of fertilized eggs. Of course, you have no understanding of oceanography or reproductive strategy. You simply drift toward these waters because something deep in your genetic programming tells you this is where you need to be. The fact that millions of years of evolution have guided you to exactly the right place is lost on you completely. Your first encounters with other reproductively active sunfish are as socially awkward as expected. A massive female approaches, her body swollen with developing eggs, moving through the water with the same graceless determination that defines your entire species. She's even larger than you, which is saying something, and her presence triggers responses in your simple brain that you've never experienced before. The courtship process, if it can be called that, unfolds like a slow-motion collision between two confused submarines. You approach each other with obvious intent, but no clear plan, bumping gently at first, then more insistently as biological imperatives override your natural passivity. The female seems equally uncertain about the proper protocol, though her body language suggests she's at least committed to seeing this through to its inevitable conclusion. Other sunfish gather in the area, creating what marine biologists would recognize as a spawning aggregation, but what looks more like a convention of lost tourists trying to figure out why they're all in the same place. Some pairs have already begun the mating process, their massive bodies intertwined in embraces that look more like construction equipment trying to mate than fish reproduction. Your eventual success in coordinating with a female partner is nothing short of miraculous, given the physical challenges involved. The logistics of aligning two creatures of your size and shape require patience, persistence, and what can only be described as optimistic improvisation. When the moment finally arrives, the female releases her eggs in a cloud so vast it temporarily changes the color of the surrounding water. Your contribution to this biological spectacle is equally impressive in scale. The fertilization process creates a soup of potential life that drifts through the warm water like an underwater snowstorm. Millions upon millions of fertilized eggs begin their journey toward becoming the next generation of confused ocean wanderers, though the vast majority will never survive long enough to develop your particular brand of determined incompetence. The spawning process leaves you completely drained, both physically and energetically. Your massive body, already struggling with the basic challenges of existence, now faces the additional burden of recovering from the most strenuous activity of your adult life. You drift away from the spawning grounds in a state of exhaustion that makes your normal lethargy look energetic by comparison. Recovery requires massive amounts of food, which presents a problem since the spawning grounds are not particularly rich in jellyfish. You find yourself in waters dominated by small schooling fish, squid, and other prey that would be perfect for a competent predator, but are essentially useless to a creature of your limited hunting abilities. Your mouth, designed for processing gelatinous prey, is poorly suited for catching anything that can swim faster than a drifting piece of kelp. Fortunately, the warm waters attract different types of jellyfish than you've encountered in the deeper regions. Upside-down jellies carpet the shallow areas like living dinner plates, their bells pulsing rhythmically as they filter feed from their inverted positions. These stationary targets are perfect for your hunting style, which consists primarily of swimming into things and hoping they're edible. Your feeding technique adapts to the new prey with typical sunfish flexibility. You approach the upside-down jellies from above, descending slowly until your mouth makes contact with their bells. The jellies respond to your presence by contracting violently, releasing clouds of stinging cells that would incapacitate most predators. You absorb these defensive measures with your usual stoic indifference, continuing to feed methodically while your nervous system ignores the chemical warfare being waged against it. The shallow waters bring new challenges in the form of increased human activity. Recreational boats crisscross the area, their occupants often startled by the sudden appearance of your massive form near the surface. You've learned to associate the sound of approaching engines with the need to dive, though your reaction time is so slow that you often end up surfacing directly in front of oncoming vessels. Your encounters with recreational boaters range from amusing to dangerous. Some boats stop to observe you, their passengers taking photographs and videos of what they assume is a rare wildlife sighting. Others attempt to avoid you entirely, swerving dramatically when your bulk appears in their path. A few unfortunate vessels have actually collided with you during your sunning sessions, their hulls scraping across your back while you remain characteristically unperturbed by the experience. The warm, shallow waters also attract a different class of predators. Bull sharks patrol these regions, their aggressive nature and indiscriminate feeding habits making them more likely than other shark species to test your defenses. When a large bull shark investigates you, the encounter has a more serious tone than your previous shark meetings. The bull shark approaches with obvious predatory intent, its movements quick and decisive. Unlike the more cautious great whites and tigers you've encountered before, this shark seems genuinely committed to determining whether you're edible. Its initial attack is swift and brutal, powerful jaws clamping down on your flank with enough force to crush most marine animals. Your response to this assault is typically underwhelming. Instead of thrashing or attempting to escape, you simply continue floating while the shark works out whether you're worth the effort. The bull shark's teeth penetrate your thick hide, but your low blood pressure and diffuse circulatory system mean you don't bleed dramatically. More importantly, your flesh apparently tastes terrible, and your body composition offers little nutritional value. The shark releases you after a few experimental bites, its expression suggesting profound disappointment in your flavor profile. You're left with another set of impressive scars to add to your collection, while the bull shark swims away in search of something more appetizing. The encounter reinforces your apparent immunity to conventional predation strategies, though you remain completely unaware of how unusual your survival abilities really are. Your post-spawning recovery period extends for weeks as your body slowly rebuilds the energy reserves depleted during reproduction. The warm waters provide adequate feeding opportunities, though the jellyfish species available here are smaller and less nutritious than the deep water giants you prefer. You compensate by eating constantly, consuming dozens of small jellies per day to meet your massive metabolic requirements. The satellite tag attached to your dorsal fin continues to transmit your location to researchers who are documenting what they're calling post-reproductive dispersal behavior. Your movements during this period show less directionality than your migration to the spawning grounds, suggesting that you're now focused primarily on recovery rather than following specific environmental cues. The research data reveals interesting patterns in your behavior that would be fascinating if you were capable of understanding them. Your feeding efficiency increases significantly in areas where multiple jellyfish species overlap, suggesting some level of prey selection that goes beyond simple opportunistic consumption. Your depth preferences shift throughout the day in ways that optimize encounter rates with different prey species, indicating a behavioral sophistication that your appearance completely belies. Your presence in the shallow waters attracts attention from marine wildlife that rarely encounters sunfish of your size. Dolphins approach with their characteristic curiosity, using echolocation to map your internal structure and apparently trying to understand how something so large can move so slowly. Their sonar clicks create a constant background noise that you ignore completely, though your primitive hearing does register the sounds. A pod of bottlenose dolphins becomes particularly interested in your sunning behavior. They've observed other marine animals seeking cleaning services from birds, but your version of this activity is unlike anything in their experience. The dolphins watch as seabirds land on your back and begin their parasite removal services, occasionally surfacing nearby to get better viewing angles of the proceedings. One particularly bold dolphin approaches close enough to investigate your cleaning session firsthand. It surfaces next to you just as a pelican lands on your back, creating a three-species interaction that highlights the unusual ecological role you've come to play. The dolphin seems fascinated by the bird's systematic approach to parasite removal, watching intently as the pelican works its way across your scarred surface. Your tolerance for these investigations continues to amaze the various species that encounter you. Most large marine animals show some defensive response when approached by potential predators or curious investigators. You simply float there, maintaining your expression of mild confusion while various creatures conduct their examinations. This passive behavior has earned you a reputation among local marine life as the ocean's most patient giant. The warm waters begin to change as seasonal shifts affect current patterns and temperature gradients. Your primitive sensory systems detect these changes long before they become apparent to human observers, triggering migratory urges that will eventually lead you away from the spawning grounds. The hormonal drives that brought you here are fading, replaced by the simpler imperatives of finding food and avoiding danger. Your departure from the spawning area is as gradual and aimless as your arrival. You drift with changing currents, following thermal boundaries that lead toward deeper, more productive waters. The transition takes weeks, during which you encounter a fascinating array of marine life, adapted to the boundary zones between different ocean environments. Pelagic stingrays glide through these transition waters like underwater flying carpets, their wing-like fins propelling them with an elegance you can only envy. When one of these graceful creatures encounters you, the contrast in locomotion styles is stark. The stingray moves with fluid precision while you drift along like a misplaced geological feature, yet both approaches to ocean travel seem equally successful in their own way. Your journey toward deeper waters brings you into contact with commercial fishing operations targeting different species than those you encountered near the spawning grounds. Longline fisheries present new hazards in the form of baited hooks suspended throughout the water column. Your poor eyesight and slow reactions make you particularly vulnerable to these nearly invisible threats. Your first encounter with a longline fishery results in exactly the kind of mishap you'd expect from a creature of your limited capabilities. You swim directly into a line of hooks, one of which embeds itself in your lower jaw. The attached weight and line create drag that affects your already compromised swimming ability, turning you into an even less efficient ocean traveler than you were before. The embedded hook attracts the attention of cleaner fish during your next sunning session. Several species of wrasses and other cleaning specialists investigate the foreign object, apparently recognizing it as something that doesn't belong in your ecosystem. Their efforts to remove the hook are only partially successful, managing to clear away the accumulated algae and parasites around the attachment point, but unable to extract the metal itself. Your body's response to the embedded hook demonstrates the remarkable adaptability that has allowed your species to survive for millions of years. Rather than becoming infected or rejecting the foreign object, your tissues simply grow around it, incorporating the hook into your anatomy as if it were a natural part of your structure. Within weeks, the hook is completely integrated into your jaw, serving as an unusual but functional component of your feeding apparatus. The fishing line attached to the hook presents ongoing challenges, creating drag that affects your movement through the water and occasionally tangling with underwater obstacles. You adapt to these inconveniences with typical sunfish stoicism, adjusting your limited swimming technique to accommodate the additional resistance without any apparent distress. Your progress toward the deeper feeding grounds continues despite these setbacks, driven by instincts that prioritize finding rich jellyfish populations over resolving minor equipment malfunctions. The embedded hook becomes just another part of your increasingly complex collection of scars, parasites, and biological modifications that tell the story of your journey through the modern ocean. The deeper waters ahead promise new feeding opportunities and new challenges, though your simple nervous system processes these prospects without excitement or apprehension. You drift toward whatever comes next with the same determined confusion that has carried you through every previous phase of your existence, proving once again that sometimes the most unlikely solutions are also the most enduring ones. Your massive form continues to cut through the water with all the grace of a mobile reef, a living testament to evolution's willingness to experiment with truly bizarre approaches to survival. The ocean stretches endlessly ahead, full of jellyfish to consume, parasites to collect, and predators to confuse with your apparent indestructibility. Your life as a sunfish is far from over, and whatever strange adventures await you will undoubtedly be just as weird and wonderful as everything that has come before. The deeper waters welcome you back like an old friend who's given up trying to understand your life choices. Your massive body settles into the familiar rhythm of deep ocean existence, though the embedded fishing hook in your jaw gives you a slightly more asymmetrical appearance than before. The line trailing behind you has attracted a small ecosystem of its own, tiny organisms colonizing the synthetic material and turning your fishing gear into a mobile habitat. Your first encounter with deep-water jellyfish after the spawning season feels like returning home after an awkward family reunion. A massive lion's mane jelly drifts into view, its tentacles streaming behind it like poisonous party streamers. Most marine predators would give this creature a wide berth, recognizing its stinging cells as a serious threat. You, naturally, swim straight toward it, with the determination of someone who's never learned the meaning of dangerous. The lion's mane, jelly's defensive response, is spectacular, but ultimately futile. Its tentacles discharge thousands of nematocysts in a coordinated barrage that would stop a shark in its tracks. You absorb this chemical assault with your usual blank expression, your nervous system apparently regarding massive doses of jellyfish venom as a mild seasoning rather than a mortal threat. The jelly's elaborate defensive systems prove about as effective as bringing a water gun to a nuclear war. Your feeding technique has evolved to incorporate the trailing fishing line into your hunting strategy, though strategy implies a level of planning that's probably beyond your capabilities. The line occasionally tangles around jellies, making them easier targets for your limited pursuit abilities. It's like having a very inefficient fishing net attached to your face, though you show no awareness of this accidental tool use. The deep ocean's seasonal cycles bring different jellyfish populations into your feeding range, creating a rotating menu of gelatinous options that keeps your simple existence interesting. Barrel jellies the size of small cars drift through your territory like living submarines, their massive bells pulsing with hypnotic regularity. When you encounter a group of these giants, the feeding frenzy that follows looks like a demolition project conducted entirely with your mouth. Your consumption of a particularly large barrel jelly attracts attention from unexpected quarters. A colossal squid, one of the ocean's most elusive predators, approaches to investigate the disturbance. This creature is built for hunting sperm whales, with arms covered in rotating hooks and intelligence that makes dolphins look simple-minded. When it encounters you methodically dismantling a jellyfish that weighs more than a compact car, the squid's reaction is visible confusion. The colossal squid circles you at a respectful distance, its massive eyes studying your feeding behavior with what might be scientific curiosity. You continue eating with your characteristic focus, completely unaware that you're being observed by one of the ocean's apex predators. The squid's tentacles probe the water around you, testing your chemical signature and trying to categorize you within its understanding of marine life. Eventually, the colossal squid reaches the same conclusion that most intelligent marine animals come to when encountering you. You're doing something important, but it's impossible to understand what that something might be. The squid retreats into the depths, leaving you to finish your meal in peace. You've successfully confused one of the ocean's smartest predators without even trying, which might be your greatest achievement to date. Your post-meal bloating reaches new extremes as your digestive system processes the massive barrel jelly. Your already ridiculous proportions become even more absurd as your stomach distends to accommodate the enormous meal. You now resemble a floating beach ball with fins, though your buoyancy control remains surprisingly effective despite your altered shape. The recovery period following these massive feeding sessions has become a vulnerable time when your mobility is even more limited than usual. During one such recovery, a group of pilot whales discovers you floating motionlessly near the surface. These intelligent cetaceans have encountered sunfish before, but never one of your impressive dimensions or obvious incapacitation. The pilot whales conduct what can only be described as a wellness check, using their sophisticated sonars to examine your internal condition. Their echolocation reveals the massive meal you're processing, the various parasites inhabiting your body, and the fishing hook embedded in your jaw. The whales exchange complex vocalizations that might be their equivalent of a medical consultation. One of the younger whales approaches close enough to gently nudge your distended belly, apparently testing whether you're still alive or just a very large piece of floating carrion. Your response is characteristically minimal, a slight shift in position that confirms you're still functional, if not exactly thriving. The whales seem satisfied with this proof of life and continue their journey, leaving you to digest in peace. Your satellite tag continues to provide researchers with data about your deep ocean lifestyle, though the scientists studying your movements are beginning to question some fundamental assumptions about sunfish behavior. Your ability to locate and consume massive jellyfish in the vast emptiness of the deep ocean suggest sensory capabilities that aren't apparent from your anatomy. You're either much smarter than you look, or you're the beneficiary of incredibly sophisticated, instinctive programming. The truth, as usual with sunfish biology, is probably more complex and bizarre than either explanation suggests. Your success as a jellyfish predator seems to depend on a combination of factors that individually appear insignificant but collectively create an effective hunting system. Your slow movement patterns match the drift rates of your prey. Your chemical sensors can detect jellyfish from considerable distances, and your apparent immunity to their defensive systems allows you to exploit a food source that most predators can't access. Your journey through the deep waters brings you into contact with hydrothermal vent communities, those alien ecosystems that exist in complete independence from solar energy. The water around these underwater geysers is superheated and filled with toxic chemicals that would kill most marine life instantly. You drift through the edges of these toxic zones with your usual oblivious calm, apparently unbothered by conditions that challenge the very definition of habitability. The creatures inhabiting these vent communities regard your presence with the same bewilderment that characterizes most of your interspecies encounters. Giant tube worms wave in the current like underwater trees, their bodies hosting bacteria that convert toxic chemicals into food. Ghostly white crabs scuttle across the volcanic landscape, their eyes adapted for a world without sunlight. When you appear in their midst like a confused tourist, their reaction is understandably mixed. Your visit to the vent communities is brief, as even your remarkable tolerance for hostile environments has limits. The extreme temperatures and chemical concentrations eventually trigger avoidance responses that send you back toward more hospitable waters. You drift away from the vents, carrying with you a collection of new parasites adapted to extreme conditions, adding to your ever-growing mobile ecosystem. The deep ocean's food webs are more complex than the surface waters you've previously inhabited, with energy flowing through pathways that don't depend on photosynthesis. Marine snow, a constant rain of organic debris from the surface, feeds a community of filter feeders and decomposers that form the base of the deep-sea food pyramid. Your role in this ecosystem is still being defined, as sunfish of your size and behavior patterns are rarely observed in these depths. So your feeding behavior adapts to the different jellyfish species found in the deep waters, though adaptation might be too generous a term for your approach of swimming into things and hoping they're edible. Deep-sea jellyfish often have more potent venoms and more elaborate defensive systems than their surface-dwelling relatives, but these adaptations prove ineffective against your apparent immunity to biological warfare. A particularly memorable encounter involves a species of jellyfish that hasn't been formally described by science. The creature is massive, even by your standards, with a bell diameter exceeding 15 feet and tentacles that trail for hundreds of yards behind it. Its body pulses with bioluminescent patterns that create complex light shows in the darkness of the deep ocean. When you decide to eat this living constellation, the result is a feeding session that looks like performance art. Your consumption of the giant bioluminescent jelly turns you into a temporary lighthouse, with your digestive system glowing so brightly that you can be seen from miles away. The light show attracts curious creatures from across the deep ocean, creating an impromptu gathering of marine life that has come to investigate the source of the unusual illumination. Deep-sea fish with their own bioluminescent displays approach cautiously, their bodies flashing in apparent response to the light emanating from your stomach. Giant isopods emerge from the seafloor like armored submarines, their primitive nervous systems drawn to investigate the disturbance. Even a few deep-sea sharks appear at the edge of the light, their ancient brains trying to categorize this unprecedented phenomenon. You remain characteristically oblivious to the attention you're attracting, focused entirely on processing the massive meal that's causing all the excitement. The internal light show continues for hours, gradually fading as your digestive system breaks down the bioluminescent compounds. By the time the glow disappears, you've inadvertently hosted one of the deep ocean's most unusual social gatherings. Your reputation among deep-sea creatures is growing, though reputation implies a level of social awareness that might be beyond your simple nervous system's capabilities. Various species have begun to recognize your distinctive sonar signature and chemical profile, identifying you as the strange creature that eats things no sensible animal would touch. Some approach out of curiosity, others maintain respectful distances, and a few seem to actively seek you out for reasons that remain unclear. A group of deep-sea octopi has apparently decided to follow you, maintaining a loose formation around your massive form as you drift through their territory. These intelligent cephalopods seem fascinated by your feeding behavior, watching intently as you consume jellyfish that they wouldn't dare approach. Their presence creates an unusual entourage that accompanies your wanderings through the deep waters. The octopi occasionally coordinate their movements in response to your behavior, suggesting a level of communication and planning that highlights the contrast between their intelligence and your apparent simplicity. When you begin feeding on a particularly large jelly, the octopi position themselves to catch fragments that break away during your methodical consumption. They've learned to benefit from your feeding activities without competing directly for your preferred prey. Your accidental role as a provider for other species extends beyond the octopi. Various scavengers have learned to follow your feeding sessions, cleaning up the organic debris that results from your somewhat inefficient eating technique. You've become the center of a mobile feeding community that moves through the deep ocean like an underwater parade with you as the oblivious Grand Marshal. The fishing line trailing from your jaw has accumulated so much marine growth that it's become a habitat in its own right. Small fish shelter among the algae and invertebrates that have colonized the synthetic material, creating a miniature ecosystem that travels wherever you go. The line has effectively become part of your body, integrated into your biology through the same adaptive processes that allow you to survive shark attacks and jellyfish stings. Your encounters with human technology become more frequent as deep-sea research activities expand into your preferred habitats. Submersibles occasionally cross your path, their bright lights and mechanical sounds creating disturbances that you acknowledge with your characteristic indifference. The human operators inside these vessels are often startled by your sudden appearance, as sunfish of your size weren't expected to inhabit such deep waters. One particularly memorable encounter involves a research submersible studying deep-sea bioluminescence. The vessel's cameras capture footage of your glowing digestive system as you process a luminescent meal, providing scientists with unprecedented documentation of sunfish feeding behavior in the deep ocean. The researchers struggle to explain how a creature with your apparent limitations can successfully hunt in one of Earth's most challenging environments. Your presence in the deep ocean is challenging scientific understanding of sunfish ecology and behavior. Traditional models suggested that sunfish were primarily surface-dwelling creatures that made occasional forays into deeper waters. Your lifestyle proves that some individuals can adapt to full-time deep-sea existence, exploiting resources that other predators can't access and thriving in conditions that should be beyond your species' capabilities. The data from your satellite tag is revealing migration patterns that span entire ocean basins, with depth excursions that reach some of the deepest waters inhabited by any bony fish. Your movements follow thermal boundaries and current systems in ways that suggest sophisticated environmental sensing, though your behavior gives no indication of the complex navigational processes that must be operating beneath your confused exterior. Your size continues to increase slowly as you exploit the abundant deep-water jellyfish populations, though you're approaching the theoretical limits of how large a sunfish can grow while maintaining basic functionality. Each additional pound makes swimming more difficult and increases the energy requirements for basic movements. You're becoming a victim of your own success, growing so large that your ridiculous anatomy is stretched beyond its already questionable design parameters. The physics of your existence are entering truly absurd territory. Your fins are now so small relative to your body mass that they provide negligible propulsion, making you almost entirely dependent on ocean currents for movement. Your turning radius has expanded to roughly the size of a small town, and your reaction time to threats has slowed to the point where avoiding danger requires enormous advanced planning. Yet somehow, you continue to function and even thrive in your deep ocean environment. Your feeding efficiency remains high, your parasite load is manageable, and your healing abilities continue to amaze the various creatures that witness your encounters with predators and hazards. You're a living proof that evolution sometimes produces solutions that work despite appearing completely impractical from any engineering perspective. Your journey through the deep waters continues with the same determined aimlessness that has characterized your entire existence, though your movements are now influenced by the complex three-dimensional structure of the deep-sea environment. Underwater mountains and deep valleys create current patterns that affect your drift, while temperature gradients and chemical boundaries provide environmental cues that your primitive nervous system can somehow interpret and respond to. The deep ocean ahead holds new challenges and opportunities, though your simple brain processes these prospects with the same blank acceptance that has carried you through every previous adventure. You drift toward whatever comes next with the confidence of a creature that has somehow survived everything the ocean can throw at it, despite being designed like a biological practical joke. Your life as a sunfish continues its bizarre trajectory through one of Earth's most demanding environments, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most unlikely approaches to survival are also the most successful. The ocean stretches endlessly around you, full of jellyfish to confuse with your eating technique, predators to baffle with your apparent indestructibility, and researchers to perplex with your impossible existence. Your deep ocean wanderings take on an increasingly surreal quality as your massive form approaches what marine biologists would recognize as the absolute limits of sunfish biology. At nearly 3,000 pounds, you've become something that shouldn't exist according to conventional understanding of fish anatomy and physics. Your body now resembles a floating garage door with decorative fins, though somehow your cardiovascular system continues to circulate blood through this absurd biological architecture. The deep waters around you have become a stage for encounters that would challenge science fiction writers. Bioluminescent creatures drift past like alien spacecraft, their bodies pulsing with light patterns that serve purposes you can't begin to comprehend. When you swim through clouds of these living stars, your passage creates disturbances that ripple outward in waves of confused luminescence. The creatures scatter around your bulk like startled fireflies, reforming their formations once you've passed through their midst with your characteristic oblivious determination. Your feeding behavior has evolved into something approaching an art form, though art implies an aesthetic sensibility that your species has never developed. When you encounter a bloom of deep-sea comb jellies, their rainbow-colored cilia creating prismatic light shows in the darkness, your consumption technique transforms the spectacle into something resembling an underwater fireworks display. Each bite releases cascades of bioluminescent particles that illuminate the water column for hundreds of yards in every direction. The comb jelly's defensive strategy involves rapid escape swimming powered by their ciliary combs, a tactic that works well against most predators, but proves completely ineffective against something that moves as slowly and predictably as you do. Your hunting method, which consists primarily of existing in the same general area as your prey and waiting for them to drift within mouth range, neutralizes their speed advantage completely. It's like trying to escape from a glacier by running really fast, theoretically possible, but ultimately pointless when the glacier is patient enough to wait for you to get tired. Your encounters with the ocean's recycling system become more frequent as you spend time in the deep waters where organic matter from the surface finally settles. Marine snow drifts down from the sunlit world above like underwater ash, carrying with it the remains of creatures that never experienced the crushing darkness you call home. This constant rain of organic debris supports entire ecosystems that exist in perpetual night, fed by the leftovers from a world they'll never see. Your massive body occasionally serves as a temporary reef for creatures seeking shelter from the current. Small deep-sea fish hover in your lee, using your bulk as a windbreak in the underwater storms created by conflicting current systems. They dart away when you move, only to return once you've settled into your next period of characteristic immobility. You've become a mobile oasis in the deep-sea desert, though your contribution to their survival is entirely accidental. The pressure at these depths would crush most surface-dwelling creatures instantly, but your body handles the extreme conditions with the same casual indifference it shows toward everything else. Your swim bladder adjusts automatically to the changing pressure, while your flexible skeleton adapts without complaint to forces that would collapse rigid structures. It's one of the few aspects of your biology that actually works better than it should, though you remain completely unaware of this engineering marvel. Your satellite tag continues to transmit your position to researchers who are beginning to question fundamental assumptions about the deep ocean's carrying capacity. Your ability to maintain your massive size in what was previously considered a nutrient-poor environment suggests that deep-sea food webs are more complex and productive than anyone realized. You're inadvertently rewriting marine ecology textbooks simply by existing in places where creatures like you weren't supposed to be able to survive. The scientific community's interest in your lifestyle has attracted attention from documentary filmmakers who are planning expeditions to capture footage of your deep-sea activities. Of course, you remain completely oblivious to your celebrity status, continuing your bizarre existence with the same determined confusion that has defined your entire life. Fame, like most complex concepts, is entirely beyond your simple nervous system's ability to process or appreciate. Your healing abilities continue to astound the various creatures that witness your encounters with the deep ocean's hazards. A recent collision with an underwater mountain left you with scrapes that would have been fatal to most fish, but your body treats major tissue damage like a minor inconvenience. The wounds seal themselves within hours, and new flesh grows to replace what was lost with the same casual efficiency your species applies to everything else. So the embedded fishing hook in your jaw has become so integrated into your anatomy that it's essentially part of your skull now. Your body has grown around the foreign object so completely that removing it would require major surgery, though surgery is a concept that exists far outside your understanding of problem solving. The hook occasionally catches small pieces of debris, turning your face into an accidental collection device for oceanic curiosities. Your parasite community has reached unprecedented levels of diversity and complexity. Marine biologists studying samples from similar sunfish estimate that you're hosting over 200 different species of parasites, symbionts, and commensals. Some of these organisms have never been described by science, representing entirely new branches of life that exist nowhere else except on creatures like you. You've become a living laboratory for evolutionary experimentation, though laboratory implies a level of organization that your chaotic ecosystem completely lacks. The cleaning sessions during your sunning behavior have evolved into elaborate productions involving dozens of species working in carefully coordinated shifts. Seabirds handle the external parasites. Small fish dart in to grab organisms in hard-to-reach crevices, and specialized invertebrates work on the microscopic inhabitants that live between your scales. The entire process can take hours, turning you into a temporary ecosystem hub that attracts marine life from miles around. Your presence at the surface during these cleaning sessions has begun to attract whale-watching boats, though the tourists rarely realize what they're observing. Your massive disk floating at the surface is often mistaken for debris or a small island until you suddenly shift position or dive. The resulting excitement among the boat passengers would be amusing if you were capable of understanding human reactions to unusual wildlife sightings. The deep waters are preparing to test your survival skills in new ways as you drift into regions affected by underwater seismic activity. The ocean floor in these areas shifts unpredictably, creating sudden changes in water chemistry and temperature that can be lethal to creatures adapted to stable conditions. Your remarkable tolerance for environmental extremes is about to face its most serious challenge yet. An underwater earthquake creates massive turbulence that tosses your enormous body around like a leaf in a hurricane. The violent water movements would disorient most marine animals, but your primitive nervous system processes the chaos with typical sunfish equanimity. You're thrown against underwater cliffs, tumbled through valleys, and generally subjected to forces that should reduce you to biological paste. Instead, you emerge from the experience with a few new scars and your characteristic expression of mild confusion intact. The seismic activity triggers underwater landslides that bury parts of the seafloor under tons of sediment, temporarily altering the local ecosystem. Your feeding grounds shift as current patterns change and jellyfish populations redistribute themselves according to new environmental conditions. You adapt to these changes with your usual flexibility, which consists primarily of floating wherever the currents take you and eating whatever jellyfish you encounter along the way. Your journey through the earthquake-affected region brings you into contact with deep-sea creatures that are rarely observed by science. Giant amphipods, crustaceans the size of dinner plates, emerge from their hiding places in the disturbed sediment. These alien-looking creatures approach your massive form with caution, their primitive nervous systems trying to categorize you within their limited understanding of the deep-sea environment. The amphipod's investigation of your body reveals the incredible diversity of life forms that have made your skin their permanent home. They begin feeding on some of your smaller parasites adding another layer to the complex ecological relationships that center around your existence. You've become a mobile ecosystem that supports not just your permanent residents, but also visiting species that benefit from the resources your body provides. Your size has reached the point where basic biological functions require enormous amounts of energy. Your heart, such as it is, must pump blood through circulatory pathways that span distances measured in feet rather than inches. Your digestive system processes meals that weigh more than entire schools of smaller fish. Every aspect of your physiology operates on a scale that challenges the fundamental principles of vertebrate biology. The energy requirements of maintaining your massive body are met through an almost constant feeding schedule that would exhaust most predators. You consume jellyfish at a rate that approaches industrial-scale harvesting, processing tons of gelatinous prey every week. Your feeding activities have begun to affect local jellyfish populations in measurable ways, though your impact on the ecosystem remains poorly understood by the scientists studying your behavior. And that's it. That's your life as a sunfish. You started as a microscopic egg, drifting helplessly through the ocean, survived impossible odds, grew into a massive floating contradiction, confused countless predators, accidentally became a mobile ecosystem, somehow managed to reproduce despite looking like evolution's rough draft, and continued existing in defiance of basic biological principles. You've proven that sometimes the most ridiculous solutions are also the most successful ones. Life as a sunfish might be bizarre, but there's another animal out there that has it way worse. Check out the video and see for yourself. Until then, see you soon.